The Australian Financial Review.
Pushing through challenging times can make a company as well as a leader.
I had everything on the wire, on the line. It was a pretty full-on period of mine. What we stand for as an organisation, it's that grit piece of it, which is just fundamental to our history and fundamental to, well, I think, our future as well.
Welcome to 15 Minutes with the Boss, a podcast about success, failure, and all the lessons learnt along the way. I'm your host, Sally Patton, and my guest today is Grant Wilckens, the co-founder and chief executive of G'day Group, a holiday parks company that owns more than $2 billion worth of property and is the largest provider of regional accommodation in Australia. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today, Grant. How are you?
Great, Sally. I'm very well, thank you.
Okay, now we've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to start the clock right now. What is your morning routine? What time do you get up? What happens?
Sally, I get up nice and early, actually. The early bird catches the worm. So I get up about 5:45 and head straight into a gym. I've got a personal gym, a gym at home. Otherwise, I go for a run if I'm on the road, if I'm in the regional Australia, in beautiful parts of the country. And then we're lucky enough to also have a beautiful sauna at home as well. So I love a sauna at the end of my exercise, and then a nice strong black coffee. I fast in the mornings and then get ready for work.
And when was the last time you would say you actually ate breakfast?
I eat breakfast on the weekends with my wife. So that is the only time that I have breakfast. Otherwise, during the week, I fast until after lunch. But on the weekends, it's a special time, actually. We don't spend a huge amount of time during the week together because I travel so much. So, we sit down, have some toast and have avocado. And that is actually the most important meal on the weekend is breakfast with my wife.
And why do you fast during the week then, in the mornings?
I started thinking that I was going to fast, and I was having macchiatos, so still milk in my coffee. Then I realised that the macchiato or the milk was not actually creating the proper fast, so I went to black coffee. And then the more I read, listen to a lot of podcasts in the sauna and that sort of thing. And so, the reality is when you think about what the benefits of fasting on the brain, dementia, future dementia, and what it does for your body, I think it's really, really important. So it's just something that I've got into over the last few years.
And do you not eat until after lunch?
Yeah, I generally sort of eat after about 1 o'clock. Finish anything, the night before at about 7:30. So it's a decent fast. Pretty religious about it because it's been something that feels to me like it's the right thing for me to do. I know it doesn't suit everybody, but it does feel like it's the right thing for me.
And I assume you don't get hangry.
I don't. I try not to get angry, although sometimes my colleagues might think I get angry. Hopefully I don't.
Okay. Now, Grant, tell me about a pivotal moment in your career. Was there a promotion you were given, a project you worked on, something that you went and purchased that changed the trajectory of what you were doing?
Oh, look, that's a great question, Sally. Very easy question for me because I am a chartered accountant by trade, worked in investment banking, and so I was very much in the finance industry. And then in 2004, I bought a caravan park, lo and behold, in Kalgoorlie, of all places. So Kalgoorlie in Western Australia, so not where you'd think you'd buy your first caravan park. And that's the beginning of the business of what it is today. So, roll forward, more than 20 years, and we've now got, almost 100 parks, 350 in the franchise business, and going from investment banking, corporate finance into caravan parks is something that I wouldn't have actually dreamt about it in the early days.
So why did you go and buy a caravan park in Kalgoorlie?
Look, I knew a lot about financing and funding, and I knew about deals. So I was a person who sort of understood the finance part of it, but didn't really know about the operations. And it was an industry which hadn't been corporatised. It was still a cottage industry owned by Australian mums and dads. There was no corporates in the market, so there was nobody that really owned multiple parks. And so I saw it as an opening to see whether I could put together a fund. So initially I bought one property, but eventually I raised some capital and created a fund, and that allowed us to actually go and acquire parks over the initial sort of 5 or 6 years. We grew very rapidly, and then the GFC hit me, which was a bit of a problem. But after that, we rebounded quickly as well. So it was a bit of an unusual pivot to go from sort of white collar into a sort of a blue collar world of holiday parks. But it's something that I truly love and I'm truly passionate about.
And how did you spot that gap in the market? I mean, you're right. It's a cottage industry, or at least was. was then. How did you find that gap?
I did look very hard at different sectors and different industries that were asset-backed, because it was always about having, as I said, I knew about the financing piece. So I wanted to find land, and I'd been a little bit involved in vineyards. We looked at surf lifesaving clubs, we looked at lawn bowls, we looked at different sort of assets that were sort of hadn't been corporatised or hadn't been rolled up from a financing perspective. And holiday parks came up as a sector which was quite unusual. Nobody had really considered holiday parks being land on the beach, on rivers, beautiful parts of Australia. And it was that moment where I thought, right, that is actually the sector or the asset class which we could acquire one property and then sort of gradually grow the business. But it started off a property business, but it very much has turned into a customer business, customer-focused business that obviously owns land as well.
And do you think that as a teenager, you always wanted to own your own business?
Yeah, I think so. My parents, my father had his own business, my grandfather had his own business, so I always had that aspiration, I think, to run my own thing or to have my own thing. So that aspiration was always there. Didn't think I was going to end up in holiday parks of all things, but my ambition was to sort of grab control, take control of my destiny. I was always a hard worker. I was always sort of very focused on my career, and that's why I sort of went into the investment banking piece. But it wasn't until I really stood back and went, right, I actually want to do this for myself. I don't want to work for an investment bank anymore. I actually want to try and have a crack and give it a go and see if I can make a business out of buying a park and seeing whether we could roll up a portfolio.
My next question is about career advice. What is the best piece of career advice you've ever been offered?
The best career advice I've ever been offered is actually from a Stanford course I did. I was fortunate enough to do a leadership course over there. And it was actually about leadership. And it was about leadership is not about me. It's not about myself becoming a better leader. It's actually about how I can create better leaders of the people that I work with. So it was about creating better leaders of those that sort of work with me. Being the CEO, when you think about leadership, it's about you, but actually it's not. It's not about you. It's actually about the people that work with you and how you can help them to become better leaders of their people.
And how do you help them to develop themselves?
Every single week I have a one-to-one with each one of my executives, and it's important that we obviously listen to them and some of their challenges of what's happening within their teams, but also cross-functionally. Cross-functional, as the business gets bigger, there are challenges cross-functionally within organisations. So it's about sort of being open and having shared problems. Problem shared is problem halved is a firm thing I believe in, and it is always about getting the issues on the table so we can help solve them together. And I'm very data-driven, so it's all about getting the data and come prepared into a discussion, and then we can solve problems together.
So why did you decide to do a course at Stanford?
I'm a chartered accountant by trade, so I did a lot of study after school and then at KPMG and sort of did this professional career, and then all of a sudden I've ended up in running an operating business like Discovery or G'day Group. So leadership and training around operations hadn't necessarily been part of what you get trained when you're in a consulting and advisory piece. So it was about 2016. So it was sort of more than 10 years into my time at G'day, and it was a time where I thought, right, I actually need to invest in myself. I've put so much investment into other people that I actually need to invest in myself, and did some research on a leadership course at Stanford. Managed to pick up a grant to get some funding to head over there, and it was the most amazing course I've ever done. But it was something that really opened my eyes around my leadership style and how we could turn this little business, or this probably a medium-sized business, into what it is today. So it was really a moment where it was, how do we take this business from being a reasonably sized business to really being what our ambition is, to be the undisputed leader in regional travel experiences. So how do we really become undisputed number one in Australia? That was the moment where we went, right, let's actually try and really set this company off.
Grant, stay where you are. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, you pick the questions. I'll see you soon. Welcome back to 15 Minutes with the Boss. I'm here with Grant Wilckens, the Chief Executive of G'day Group. Now, Grant, in front of you is a scruffy brown box, inside which are about 20 questions. Please pick them out one by one, and we'll get going with some more Q&A. What has been one of the most difficult days in your career and why?
Probably when Lehman Brothers collapsed. So the global financial crisis was the one for me. So 2004, I started the business. We grew very rapidly. And so I had 40 parks in 36 months and my balance sheet was pretty, I had a lot of debt. So being a founder, I sort of tried to sort of leverage my equity as best I could. And as a result, I had way too much leverage and too much debt, including a mezzanine piece. And when Lehman Brothers collapsed and the GFC took hold in Australia, I got thrown into the bad bank. Way too many assets that had a lot of green grass and not a lot of income. So we were very property focused as opposed to customer focused. And it really made me shift my priorities, where I thought less about how beautiful the property was on the beach or on the river, and it was actually about customer acquisition and how do I think about, water parks and jumping pillows and playgrounds to try and get repeat visitation. So we all thought about acquiring customers and repeat visitation and extending stays.
So when you talk about becoming a customer business, you're talking about becoming an actual operating business that is trying to improve its revenues and profits on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
As opposed to just sitting on the property and waiting for assets to appreciate.
That's right. So the property aspect was there, and we had relied heavily on property growth, but we really didn't have the customers in the property to obviously pay interest and pay wages and pay creditors. And so it was really a matter of saying, okay, we've got to grow this business. We've got to grow, year-on-year growth. And how do we do that? And it was about making sure we had the right facilities and the right marketing tools. And we ended up with a loyalty program where we really made sure we could think about how do we get these customers to come back. And also I was in the bad bank, so I had to really turn this business around, which we did. We did successfully. We sold 9 assets. We turned the business around, and really from 2010, it's been exponential growth ever since then. But it was that pivotal moment in 2008 where it was a pretty challenging 18 months, and I felt like I was on a treadmill and I was running as faster and faster and faster. I couldn't get off. So it was a moment where I wish I was still in investment banking rather than doing caravan parks. So
how scary did it get? How scared were you?
Very scared. I had everything on the wire, on the line.
Your home?
My home. I got married in 2004 as well. I had young children. My son was born in 2006, my daughter in 2008. So it was a pretty full-on period of mine where it was probably the hardest I've ever worked, most stressful I've ever been. It was incredibly challenging, but it was probably something that I now look at what we stand for as an organisation, and it is grit, it is determination. It's those never give up values, which are really what makes Discovery and G'day Group what it is today. It's that grit piece of it, which is just fundamental to our history and fundamental to, I think, our future as well.
Okay, I love that. Have another fish in the box. What part of your job don't you like?
The biggest part that I don't like is probably conflict between executives. I think one of the challenges as you get larger and you get more senior executives, because if you go back through the history, when you're a small company, you've got probably less experienced executives, and as you get larger and the business gets larger, you generally hire more capable people because you have bigger budgets. And so as you become a larger business, some of the views of the executive are quite strong. They're generally ambitious people, and they've got their own desires of their own careers and aspirations. And so sometimes when you get conflict or two competing people that really want to be sort of front and centre, sometimes you've got to manage that conflict. So conflict between senior executives is probably the hardest thing to manage as a CEO.
And how do you manage that?
Look, it's not easy. Again, I find that because I'm the CEO, I can sort of bring people together. So I generally try and sit down with each executive individually to start with and explore the problem that we need to solve. And then once we've got to a reasonable position ourselves, even if it is a difference of opinion between one executive and the other, I generally like bringing people together to then explore and thrash out the problem together. Now, if they're polar aparts in terms of their decision making and what the conclusion should be to a decision, then obviously you've got to have one winner and one loser, which is always a challenge. But it's about sort of how do we again, data is the key for me. I don't let sort of emotions get in the way of things. And if the data suggests one way or another, we will generally back the data solution rather than the gut feel. Believe in gut a lot, but also data never lies. And so it's always making sure we've got the right information to make the decision.
I have one last question for you, which we ask all our guests, and that is, if for some reason you weren't running G'day Group, what would you be doing?
It's a good question. I mean, I'd love to be travelling around Australia as a grey nomad, but I'm not quite there yet. I think I'm a corporate finance deal person, so I think I would have ended up in private equity or something like that, just because of my finance background, and I like doing deals. So I think that's probably where I'd end up. It's probably still in finance and numbers, but it would be probably in a investing world or private equity space.
Okay, so in your next life, maybe an investor.
Maybe that's the go.
Okay, on that note, Grant, our 15 minutes is up. Thank you so much for allowing us to spend 15 minutes with Boss. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Sally. Appreciate it.
And thank you to everyone for listening. If you like the podcast and you want to hear more, consider sharing the podcast or writing a review, as it helps us to reach more people. And follow us wherever you get your podcasts. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com, and you can subscribe to the Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. This podcast was hosted by me, Sally Patton, produced by Iona Rennie. Our theme is by Alex Gao, and our executive producer is Fiona Buffini. See you next week.
The Australian Financial Review.